Hello, friends. This is Dave Hurwitz, executive editor at ClassicsToday.com, here with 16 great fugal symphonic finales. Now, you might think this is a rather esoteric list, and maybe in some respects it is, but the idea of putting a fugue in your symphony's finale is actually a very popular strategy and a brilliant one. It achieves a lot of things all at once. And I just want to sort of talk about what those things are and then give you the list. Now, a fugue, as some of you may know, is a musical form in which one voice chases another voice. Fuggire, from the Italian, to fly, is actually where it comes from. So you've got a tune or a theme or an idea, and it gets played in one part, then another part comes in, then another part comes in, then another part comes in. It's staggered intervals. And you can have as many parts as you want, as makes sense musically. If you're a modern avant-garde composer, you could have 10,000 parts, and it all comes out sounding like mud. But most of the time, composers limit themselves to 3, 4, 5, something like that, somewhere in that area, parts. And you don't have to keep them absolutely distinct all the time. Sometimes you can have 2 ideas, that you get a double fugue, or 3 ideas, and you get a triple fugue. And they're all bouncing around in counterpoint to each other, which makes things really fun to hear. But the expressive effect of a fugue is rather interesting, because whereas in the sonata style from the classical period onward, which is of course when symphonies evolved, the basic form is dramatic. That is, it's a series of events in which the themes act as characters running through a landscape defined by the key or tonality in which the music is in. Now, the fugue is much older than this. It was and it goes way back to like the Renaissance. I mean, it's been around forever. And the fugue itself is rhetorical rather than dramatic. It doesn't have events. It's a discussion. It's a conversation between these various parts. It's not dramatic. It's monolithic. It doesn't really go anywhere the way sonata movements go anywhere. And why does this work well in a finale? Well, actually, it works well because finales are supposed to be usually somewhat lighter and fluffier than the more intellectually demanding and extended and developmental and perhaps dramatic first movements. That doesn't mean you can't have fugues in first movements. Many composers put them there. But in a finale, they actually serve to break up the ongoing dramatic thing. It's a moment to stop and talk, to have a chat. And the chat is useful to give a finale a certain substance by putting this sort of rhetorical object in the middle of it, but not making it so tense as it would have otherwise been had it been a first movement. So finales are juicy ideas. I mean, fugues are juicy ideas to stick in finales. And composers do all kinds of things with them. You can have a finale which is entirely worked out like a fugue. It's entirely in counterpoint with entries following each other and all of that stuff. Or you can have a finale in which the fugues are just episodes, part of a larger whole, that they are inserted into a larger form, like a rondo. You know, a rondo goes A, B, A, C, A, D, A, like that. And one of those middle sections can be a fugue, or the beginning. The A section can be a fugue that gets interrupted and continuously pops up again and again. There's no limit to what you can do with your fugue. Russian composers are often famous for having fugal development sections in their symphonies because Russian music is known for being so hysterical and emotionally extravagant that composers also get nervous and need to show that they're smart too. So they want to do something that's musically learned. And learned means counterpoint. So you put a fugue in your thing, like Tchaikovsky's first movement of the Sixth Symphony. That has a fugue type thing. It's not a fully worked out one, but it's a fugue type thing, which was copied by Rachmaninoff in his first symphony. Sometimes Shostakovich does it. So you're going to find these things all over the place. But finales is really where they rock in the classical repertoire. And so here are 16 symphonies that have fugal finales, and they're all different. They're wonderful to compare. And actually, The fugal bits serve very different expressive purposes as well, because great composers can do that. But they all have in common this idea of stopping for a moment and discussing something, and then continuing on. And some pieces embody that more graphically than others. So, number one, Haydn, Symphony No. 40. The whole finale is a fugue. It's just a fugue. Haydn decided to do fugal finales quite frequently, most famously in his string quartets, Opus 20, where you get 3 of them. But in his symphonies, they're a little bit more rare, because orchestral fugues are not as strict as purely linear, where you definitely have one person assigned to one part. In an orchestra, you've got all these extra instruments, and you have to color them, and you do things, and some accompany, and it's a little more complicated. But Haydn's Symphony No. 40 is a brilliant example of a finale which is all fugue. And it may have been the proximate inspiration for Mozart in his Jupiter Symphony, which is probably the most famous fugal finale in all of classical music. Now, there is no fugue, no actual formal thing called fugue in the finale of the Jupiter Symphony. The entire movement is a contrapuntal texture made up of 4 or 5 ideas which are treated as counterpoint fugally. Some people have said that the finale is thus a fugue, but it's not. It really isn't. But it's fugal, meaning it's about the texture of fugue. Tovey, the great English critic and musical scholar, said that fugue isn't really a thing. It's actually a texture. It's like blank verse in poetry, or iambic pentameter. If you're writing in fugal style, you're writing in a type of contrapuntal discourse throughout your finale or whatever movement you're dealing with. And so, yes, Mozart's Jupiter, very, very famous. After that, Beethoven, the Eroica Symphony, that finale is a wonderful fugue based on the bass line of the tune. The finale is a set of variations, but one of those variations is an ongoing fugue based on dum ba dum da 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 da, and it goes on like that. And the fugue gets interrupted by other variations and then comes back, and then gets interrupted and then comes back until it finally gets sort of swallowed up in the whole thing. It's a brilliant combination of fugue and variation form, which actually gives the finale a certain weight it wouldn't otherwise have, while at the same time, allowing it to be nicely episodic and more relaxed than the extremely turbulent first movement, never mind the gripping funeral march that comes next. A brilliant, brilliant example of fugue in combination with other forms. After Beethoven, Berlioz, the Symphonie fantastique. Now, Berlioz hated counterpoint. He hated his teachers at the Paris Conservatory. And when he writes fugues, they're almost always ironic or parodistic. That's the way he liked to do counterpoint. And this one is no exception, because this fugue is based on the tune of the Witches' Sabbath. In the finale, it's ya da 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 ba dum ba dum ba da 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 bam bam ba bam. It's a jocular, grotesque fugue, and it adds enormously to the weird and wacky nature of that particular finale, which is, of course, a morphium, morphium, whatever it's called, induced hallucination, which is, psychotic. So it's a psychotic fugue. It's just delicious. And next we get Tchaikovsky. There he is. But not a first movement, a finale. The finale of his very first symphony, Winter Dreams. It's based on the opening theme. Da 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 dum ba da 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 da. And here he does something quite similar to what Beethoven does. It's a fugue that's interrupted with other episodes, because you have this beautiful tune in the middle, and then it comes back, and then there's the beautiful tune, and then it comes back. It works quite well, actually, in the context of that finale. Tchaikovsky is often criticized for being kind of iffy when it comes to symphonic form, but that's only because people are very, very intolerant of composers who experiment with form, which Tchaikovsky often did. And his use of fugue in this finale, I think, is one of his more successful attempts to do something in the learned style. It's not really a learned finale at all. It's just fun, but it's a fun fugue. After Tchaikovsky, well, talk about learned. Oh, my God. Bruckner, Symphony No. 5, the great German fugal finale. It's actually a double fugue. It's based on two subjects. The first is bum, 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 ba-dum, bum, bum, ba-dum, 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 bum, bum. The finale begins with that, but it doesn't go anywhere. And then the chorale comes in. Ya, dum, ba, ya, da, 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 dum. Right? And then the fugue starts all over again with that. And as that gets whipped up, the other one comes in and they all get combined in this huge contrapuntal mishmash. It goes on for like 10 minutes, 15 minutes. It's a big sucker. And then when you come out of it, you're back at the original second theme, which is lovely and lyrical, and it leads to a huge combination of the chorale, the theme from the first movement, and all the tunes come back in that huge blazing climax at the end. But it's the fugue that does it. Some people hate it because it's so relentlessly worked out and so long. But oh my goodness, it's just fabulous. It's Bruckner's contrapuntal masterpiece. And it gives that finale a tremendous weight. This is a finale symphony. Everything that's going to happen happens in the finale. And what happens is this enormous discussion on a huge, huge scale. It's a question of scale. So you achieve the paradox of bigger and more climactic, but not necessarily more developmental and more dramatic. It's not a dramatic finale. It's a monolithic finale. It's all about the grandeur. Yeah, lots of grandeur. So after Bruckner, Stenhammar, the great Swedish composer, his Symphony No. 2 has a thoroughly polyphonic fugal finale that really it's a long movement also. It's a climactic movement, but again, climactic movement in construction of a big, impressive object. It's a beautiful symphony, my God. If you don't know Stenhammer's Second Symphony, you really should give it a listen because it's just terrific. But it's part of what Stenhammar regarded as a neoclassical approach to the symphony, a more austere approach to the symphony. Rather than writing something that was big and romantic and colorful and all that all hangs out, he wrote a piece that is based essentially in Swedish folk music, but which also has sort of the folk music grows up as the symphony goes on, and you get this very, very intellectually sophisticated finale that is, again, just a grand climax to what has come before. It's quite beautiful, incredibly beautiful. Mahler, Symphony No. 5. Now, Mahler was an amazing contrapuntist. I mean, there's an insane double fugue in the first movement of the Eighth Symphony. As we know, there's the Rondo Burlesque in the Ninth. Mahler wrote fugal or contrapuntal pieces all his life. But the symphony finale that has the real fugue in it is the Fifth. And in this case, the fugue is the subject of a rondo. It gets interrupted by various episodes, but then comes back each time to continue its fugal peregrinations. It's a wonderful movement. Oh, it's just wonderful. The finale is actually, the tune is the like that. My voice is shot. Anyway, it's a great fugal finale based on a symphony that's been headed that way, because you have also fugal moments in the scherzo, that business. That's all very contrapuntal, and it's true of the whole symphony. But it's only the finale where you get the actual fugue thing really hopping along the way fugue things tend to hop along. And after Mahler, Nielsen, Symphony No. 5. Oh my goodness. Nielsen was another composer who often turned to counterpoint. quite wonderfully. But the finale of his Fifth Symphony is extraordinary because it consists of two separate fugues. There's a big introduction, a big orchestral exordium at the start. Then you have a quick fugue that goes nowhere. Then you have a slow, thoughtful fugue that works its way back in a climax to the opening, to the beginning, which then is able to dash forward to the glorious, blazing ending. And those two fugues are exquisitely beautiful. The second one is based on the opening tune. Da 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 dum, ya da 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 dum, like that. And it's just an amazing movement. And it uses counterpoint in just the most fabulous way, almost exactly as counterpoint is supposed to be. The first fugue is a discussion, a frantic, creepy discussion, like that. And it just becomes this hubbub of foolishness led by a manic clarinet. But the second one, it's thoughtfulness. And you feel the music discussing its way to an exit point. It's marvelous. It's absolutely marvelous. And a wonderful combination of fugue used for a dramatic purpose, really, which is unusual. You know, Nielsen doesn't get credit for being the kind of forward thinker that he often was, but he was formally enormously gifted, just marvelous. So there's that one. Then there's Walton, Symphony No. 1, has a wonderful fugue. Now, the Walton Symphony No. 1 fugue is almost a parody of what fugues do, because the symphony is doing its da-da-da, ba-da-da-da-dum, ba-da-da-dum, ba-da-doo-da-doo. It's all zippy and celebratory. And then it comes to this big climax. It stops dead. Da-da-da-da, boom. Pause. And then the fugue comes in. Ba-da-da-da-dum, ba-da-da-da-da-da-da-da-dum, ba-da-dum. And that fugue is like so much a central episode, completely separated from everything else. But Walton, of course, being a great composer, does manage to work his way back to the beginning. It has a clear ending as well. And that's just your central episode. It's like, okay, we need to have a chat, folks. And we have a chat. And it gives the finale a certain weight that it wouldn't otherwise have, because it has this big, like, monolith in the middle. And that's the fugue. It's quite brilliantly worked out. And after that, well, Vaughn Williams Symphony No. 4. Here the fugue is the coda to the whole movement. I mean, the movement is fun. You know, it's nasty and mean. It's stomping around, you know, like this. But then the coda begins, and it's based on the initial motive of the whole symphony, which is a four-note idea, da, 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 like that. And all the themes from the finale get mixed up in this whole fugal concatenation of vicious, argumentative nastiness. It's a mean fugue. It's like the Rondo Burlesque from Mahler's Ninth. It's bitter, and it snaps and snarls and rises to just this huge screaming climax that returns to the opening Godzilla stomps on London opening of the symphony, ending with a thud on the bass drum. Oh, it's just marvelous. It's a fugal coda. And that, you know, has its purpose in that specific spot of the movement, which until that point hasn't really been contrapuntal at all. So it creates a wonderful way to tie the symphony together. That's what it does. It ties. You see, it takes all the themes and ties them up in one neat package. So after the Vaughn Williams, Tippett, Symphony No. 1, this whole movement is a fugue. The whole thing, from the very beginning, it's a big, bouncy, contrapuntal fresco of fugal stuff. And it rises again to a big, big, buoyant climax, which is constantly undermined by thuds, boom, on the bass drum, and that keeps thudding away, which undermines the counterpoint until it all just kind of evaporates. It's a very unsatisfying ending in some ways, because it's going like gangbusters, and then all of the momentum just gets sucked right out of it. It's very artistically done. I mean, it's totally intentional and deliberate what Tippett does. Whether you like it, whether it feels good, is a whole nother issue, because all of this counterpoint feels so vibrant and just you know, it's exploding with with vigor. And then, nope, it just slowly winds down until it softly fades away. Oh well, sometimes that's what happens. But it is a major, major fugal finale. I mean, it's the most fugal finale since or one of them, since Mozart's Jupiter Symphony. It's very, 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 very fugal. After Tippett, Hindemith, his band symphony. I love the band symphony. It's so much fun. And the finale, of course, it's a fugue. I mean, it's Hindemith. He's German. He has to write a fugue. You've just got to do fugues. German composers are into them ever since Bach wrote lots of fugues. They feel that you can't be German unless you write a fugue somewhere. So the finale is a fugue. It's a big fugue for a whole concert band. It's also extremely energetic and full of captivating life. But like most fugues, it's a capstone. It's not a end of a journey or saga. Saga's already over. And now we're going to talk about it. Now we're going to show you what it meant. Now we're going to just build an edifice. And it's a wonderfully granitic edifice, which sort of suits band music. Band music tends to be kind of big and ballsy. And this is a big and ballsy fugue. Wonderful one. Piston, Symphony No. 6. Oh, what a wonderful symphony this is. It's beautiful. It's gorgeous. In the end, the finale, it sounds like a Western. Da, da, cha, 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 ba, da, da, ba, dum, ba, ba, da, da, dum, ba, ba. It's wonderful. And that tune becomes a fugue. Do, 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 fantastic. And that fugue is actually it's very well worked out. Tippett was a very, very smart composer, and it works its way right back to the opening, and the rest, as they say, is history. That's a classic central development fugue, where you don't want to write a dramatic development. You don't want to have incidents that happen and sound tragic, whatever, right? You just want to keep things going breezily and find a way to work your way to a wonderful, wonderful conclusion. That's what that kind of a fugue does. And it does it perfectly, absolutely wonderfully. Next, Norway's greatest symphony, well, one of them, by Finn Mortensen, which I talked about. I did a whole video about it. It's a brilliant work, fabulous work. And the finale is a triple fugue. It's on 3 subjects. It's just this huge contrapuntal mess. It's big and it's bold and it's got all kinds of stuff happening, very, very cleanly written. He was influenced by Hindemith, I think, in this symphony very much. And you have a lot of similar treatment of harmony and a similar approach to the clarity of the contrapuntal lines. And it's a wonderful piece. And it rises again to several climaxes along the way to a return of the symphony's motto theme, which is very beautiful. It's a modal, haunting, almost folk-like tune that permeates the work from the first movement. And it's ya da 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 do 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 do. Well, never mind. That's not modal. That's just gross. But it's fantastic and brilliant, and it leads to just a fantastically, wonderfully double. I keep using the same adjectives over and over and over again, but you get the point. It's powerful, and it's exciting, and it's enthralling, and there's a new adjective, enthralling. It enthralls. But last but not least, one of the most fascinating fugues in any finale, that of Shostakovich's 13th Symphony, the Babi Symphony. Because this is a vocal symphony, but here the fugue is purely instrumental. It illustrates a point in the text. The text is a career, and Shostakovich is talking about how he follows a career by not being a careerist. In other words, he's not bowing to authority. He's not turning in his fellow composers. He's not trying to be grasping and climb the career ladder by being totally career oriented. He followed his career by being a musician. And the object he chooses to show his gift as a musician is an intellectual one which is unique to music, one which can't be interpreted as anything other than what it is. It's a fugue based on the sort of Russian dance tune that he uses in that finale. Bum, 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 ba, da, 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 dum, bum, 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 like that. And he works out this beautiful, beautiful fugue that leads to the conclusion, the wonderful apotheosis from the bass soloist, that brings the symphony to its peaceful conclusion. It's one of the most wonderful uses of fugue that I've ever encountered. It's such a genius move to interpret the text in that way and to make the plea that musicians should first and foremost concern themselves with music and not with climbing the career ladder or stomping on their fellows or being toadies to the regime, that they have an obligation above all to be musical. And Shostakovich chooses the fugue to make that point, and it's so incredibly moving. It's an amazing, amazing moment in an amazing work, an astonishing work. So that, my friends, is the conclusion of this list of 16 incredible fugal finales to 16 really incredible symphonies. The fugue is part of the argument. And if you like fugues, or if you like counterpoint, or if you're curious, it makes a wonderful source of comparison to hear how composers turn to this technique, this musical object, and integrate it into the larger structure of the movement, which in turn is integrated into the larger structure of the symphony. So keep on listening, friends. Thanks so much for joining me. Take care.